Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of the Lineup Lab. It is Sunday night, which means we're talking about the Sunday Million and Millionaire Maker and reviewing the winning lineups. Sadly, again, I was not a winner of the Sunday Million or the Millionaire Maker, but my twin brother Danny actually did quite well in that $300, $400 Wildcat special on DraftKings, so I'm going to review his lineup as well. But first, we're going to start on FanDuel and look at the Sunday Million winner. This is a guy named J-Megs. It looks like actually from his profile that he's not a professional because he just doesn't have enough to get that solid blue star. So congratulations to him, and I'm just going to go over his lineup. Let's just start with the stack. So he chose Aaron Rodgers and Jordy Nelson, and this was a stack that was not totally under the radar. I think a lot of smart players were on him. I was on the FantasyLabs podcast this week. This is someone that CSU Ram identified as a stack that he really loves. So not a surprising stack, but I think I do want to illustrate the point that, Jordy Nelson missed all of 2015. So if you're new to fantasy, you might not remember in 2014, he's a really, really great wide receiver. And despite coming off a bad injury, it looks like he's really back, and this is going to be a stack that is just going to be in play every week because it's just two really talented players, and I think it's a stack that you should be looking to keep going to week after week after week. Moving on to running back, Melvin Gordon obviously was 36% owned, and that was not terribly surprising. He's coming off a great week, and he had a great matchup. Didn't do too well. He actually kind of got lucky that he got a touchdown. But that being said, I think running backs in general do not have as much variation and as much luck factor as other positions. They're usually going to get their opportunities. And so in general, when there's a guy who might be this highly owned, I really am not that into just trying to fade him. So I think this was a smart play by J-Megs to play Melvin Gordon, and he didn't produce as well as some other running backs, but I still do really like the play. But the running back that I really do love here is LeSean McCoy, and he was someone that I played in some lineups, and I think a lot of people overlooked him because of basically it was a bad matchup. But the price here for a player like McCoy was really, really good, and I think this is actually going to be a theme on DraftKings as well. I think these type of guys are really good tournament players when the matchup isn't great, but the player is talented and their price is really good. And when players who are talented have price drops like this, they become pretty good values no matter what the matchup is. And they usually end up having it performing well. And, again, Arizona's a tough matchup. It's 6,700 for LeSean McCoy. He's really an upper 7,000 player on the Bills when he's getting 80% of snaps and red zone carries. I think this is a really great play, and I think these are the type of plays you want to look for in GPPs. You want to look for these talented guys who are underpriced in the matchups that don't scream anything, because those are the guys who are going to be under-owned but can produce quite a bit. So a really fantastic play here by J-Megs. I'm going to just run through the rest of this lineup because nothing is that compelling to me. Jarvis Landry versus Cleveland, play I used a lot, and it was a great matchup. He's a great wide receiver. His price at 7,000 is just way too low. Made sense to me. Gary Barnidge, I think it was a solid play. I didn't love it, but there really was no one to throw to on Cleveland with Corey Coleman going down, so I think it was a smart play. Dan Bailey, great talented kicker. I think that was a okay play as well. And with Marvin Jones, I think he definitely got lucky. He had some big plays that, they're not going to come every game. And I think he's the type of player that when he's under-owned like this, he's a guy with a really high A-dot, and wide receivers with high A-dots are guys that you want to play when they're not going to be highly owned and fade when they're going to be highly owned, because they're going to be higher variation type players, because if they're relying on catching balls down the field, sometimes they get unlucky and they don't catch those balls. So I think this was a smart play because he was going to be under-owned, and we got lucky. But it was sort of planned luck because Marvin Jones is the type of guy who can have big games with that high ADOT. And then the Chiefs D, I mean, this was just complete luck. I don't even think the Chiefs had any sacks. They had 6 interceptions, apparently, 2 fumble recoveries, 2 defensive TDs. This was just, I mean, this is just pure luck. I don't think this is something that was easy to predict. Wow, they had an amazing game. But usually the only thing you can predict with defenses is sacks. And if a team's not getting sacks, but they're scoring this highly, then I would say you got pretty lucky. So it was I like this lineup a lot. Don't get me wrong, and the Chiefs D was a fine play. But I think that specific one got very, very lucky there. But congratulations to J-Megs. Now I'm going to move on to DraftKings, where a professional one, this guy named Papa Gates, and man, he killed it this week. And he had some plays as well that were sort of that value talent play that I was talking about. And one was Zach Miller. So Zach Miller did not have a very good first and second week. And it caused his salary to drop. And he was a player that people liked to start the season. He had a good end of the year last year. And again, like McCoy, he had this price drop to $2,900. The matchup is actually pretty decent as well. But he actually was under 1% owned. And that's just because he didn't have the performances that screamed for you to play him. But people forgot this is a talented guy. And when a talented guy like this gets this cheap, it's someone that you want to jump over. And I think that was really the play that won it because he was behind until Zach Miller had a really, really awesome game. And then there's some interesting plays here. We have McCoy, which apparently you just really like McCoy because his price wasn't even that great on DK, although he does catch balls, so that helps. He went Stafford and Jones, which makes sense. He went T.Y. Hilton. I think that also made sense as well. With Dante Moncrief out, there just is not that many people to go to on this Indy team. So that was a smart play, and Hilton had a fantastic game. Seahawks D, this was a team that I personally didn't love just because San Francisco actually has not been giving up many sacks this year, and I like to look for that sacks matchup when picking defenses. And they didn't actually get any sacks, so I think San Francisco sometimes seems like a good matchup because maybe they're not projected to score that many points. But I think they're actually not a great matchup for defenses because they are a quick hitting offense and they don't get sacked very much. And Gabbard hasn't really been turning it over. But there are 2 plays that stand out to me here because these were kind of early morning plays that I know that I would bet that Papa Gates switched these guys. The first one was Shane Vereen, who Rashad Jennings, his co-running back, they're basically in timeshare, got scratched. And Vereen actually had been running the ball some in this Giants offense. He's usually known as a pass catcher. And I think this is a smart play because the Giants were preparing to have Jennings in this game. So it didn't seem like Orleans Darkwa, the backup running back, was going to get carries. Unluckily for Papa Gates, actually, Vereen fumbled at one point and then basically got benched. He was out-snapping all the other running backs by a lot. So I think this is a really smart play, especially against a bad Redskins D. And making those good late swap plays, or not late swap, but just plays based on that early morning news, if you can react right, if you not overreact to news that doesn't matter and react well to news that does matter, and that's really difficult, it can pay off big time. And that paid off big time for him with Terrell Pryor Sr. And I think this was a fantastic play. I think he already was in play at 3,400. He's a guy that I actually swapped to in the morning. And the reason that I think he was a really good play is there were rumors that he was going to get some snaps at quarterback. And I think a lot of people just said, oh, whatever, it's Terrell Pryor. Why does it matter? That actually matters quite a bit because if someone like him is going to get snaps at quarterback, that means he's going to run some read option. He could be used in the red zone as a gadget quarterback. And he actually was. He ran for a TD. He actually threw for some yards, rushed for 20 yards. And that supplemented a game that really was surprisingly good. But and I honestly think this news probably won't ever come out. Like, there's not going to be news like this again this season. This is a really unique situation that I've actually never seen before. But I think it was I would bet that he didn't have Terrell Pryor in many lineups before that morning news, and then heard that morning news and switched to him a lot. And I think that was a really smart move on Papagate's part. So some reactions to morning news really, really helped him here, and it helped him win or tie for $1 million. He actually did win the Wildcat special, beating my twin brother, who Danny Steinberg, no more I love yous. And actually, it was really sad because I was rooting hard for Danny, and there's a point where the score of the San Diego game was 22-20. T.Y. Hilton scored a touchdown. Papa Gates is still way behind Danny. He just needed to fade Zach Miller, getting, 16 fantasy points? Zach Miller has the game of his life. So, terrible, terrible ending sequence for Danny, who could have won the Wildcat special. But I just want to go over his lineup because I really like this one. So, he used Melvin Gordon, and I was talking to Danny this week. He really loved Melvin Gordon, so that's not surprising. And he went with the normal and probably most shocky Tannehill Landry stack. Also think was a fine play. We've talked about the merits of Landry. I like Tannehill a lot this week because he's just so cheap, and it was a great matchup. So I think that was a smart play. Really, really love this Christine Michael play. And if you notice, by the way, for you guys at home, if we're just comparing the good players versus the Millionaire Maker players, if you look at Danny's lineup in here, Christine Michael 15% owned. Well, look at this. Christine Michael 29% owned. Clearly the sharp players were on Michael, and for good reason. This San Francisco matchup, I think a lot of new players to fantasy might be underrating this. When this offense, and I talked about this last week in the video, when this offense moves really quickly, and that makes for a really fantastic fantasy matchup. Do not underrate the San Francisco matchup, even with players who you're kind of like, whatever. But the Seattle running game especially had not been doing well. But this was an unbelievably good matchup, and I think that the sharp players did not underrate it, but the field really did. So I really love this play of Kristen Michael. He also had Terrell Pryor, and this is something Danny and I talked about in the morning, where this is someone that we both really liked. I think that this news about him playing quarterback was just really important. Danny agreed, and it was someone who was on Danny's radar already, so I'm not surprised that he played him. Really smart move. Mike Evans was pretty chalky against the Rams, had a great game. And here's an interesting one. He actually used Eagles D and Antonio Brown, so he actually used the Eagles D with a wide receiver. I actually think this is an interesting play, and it's not that bad of a play because, especially, and you should only really do it on DraftKings, but when you have DraftKings where it's PPR and someone can have a big game without scoring a touchdown, I actually think this is a fine play because, let's say Eagles get a pick six or a special teams touchdown or something. Pittsburgh gets down. It means they're going to throw to Brown quite a bit, and they did. They threw 12 times, 140 yards. So I think this is actually kind of a fine play. It's same with maybe Pryor and the Dolphins D. I think that wouldn't have been a bad play either. And then the last play he had was Jimmy Graham. And this is someone I was kind of skeptical of. Danny was talking with me about how he liked him. But this was purely a price play and a history play. So Jimmy Graham last year, most people said he had he did have a pretty bad season for Jimmy Graham. I think he probably had like 500 yards and just a few touchdowns. But even at that rate, he actually was priced so well that if you projected him at that rate, he would be projected over 10 points. I think he probably averaged like 4 catches for 50 yards and a quarter of a touchdown a game last year. That's already over 10 points on DraftKings, which is over triple Graham's value at 3K. And again, he has a really plus matchup. I think this is a really smart play, and it's something you should look for. We're still early enough in the season where people might underperform from their career numbers, and at their you might be able to expect that they will continue to perform at their career numbers even though they're struggling early. So with a guy like Graham, especially if they're well priced, I think this is a smart play that it's only 4% of people in the Wildcat special and only 3.7 in the Millionaire Maker. So I think that was a great play by Danny. And this lineup was a little more contrarian at some parts, especially with the Eagles D and Antonio Brown. End up getting Danny second. Congratulations to him. And I like this lineup a lot. And I also like, by the way, really great correlation here. Players on opposing teams, especially wide receivers, they actually do have some correlation. So I really like pairing Terrell Pryor here with Jarvis Landry, because if Jarvis Landry does well, it means Pryor is probably going to get thrown to a lot more. The Browns are going to pass a lot more. So I like having this kind of correlation there. So anyways, longer video than I want to do, but Millionaire Maker, congratulations to Papa Gates, who tied for $1 million, won that Wildcat special. Congratulations to J Megs for winning that $200,000 on FanDuel. And thank you guys so much for watching. As always, please subscribe if you want to see more of these videos, and like this video if you enjoyed it. So thank you so much, and look for more videos later in the week. See you later.